2, 1.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the Right Sizing Discussion Group. Ms. King, may I have a roll call, please?
Danielle Gonzalez.
Here.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Here.
Barbara Peterson.
Here.
Peggy Mueller Aragon.
Here. Okay, community members may attend the APS Right Sizing Discussion Group in person at the Allison Bruce King Educational Complex, 6400 Uptown Boulevard. This meeting will be held in the John Milne Community Boardroom and is open to the public and will be live streamed and videotaped. So our first item for consideration and action is adoption of the June 12th, 2023 Right Sizing Discussion Group agenda and approval of the March 27th, 2023 Right Sizing Discussion Group meeting minutes. So
I will move for adoption of the June 12th, 2023 Right Sizing Discussion Group agenda and approval of the March 27th, 2023 Right Sizing Discussion Group meeting minutes.
And I'll second. This is Yolanda.
okay, Ms. King, a roll call, please.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Peggy Mueller Aragon.
Yes. Okay, our next item for discussion is the fiscal analysis of Corrales Elementary School, Janet Kahn School of Integrated Fine Arts, and La Luz Elementary School. And I think people have the PowerPoint presentation. So Ms. Hicks, you have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez, can you go to slide 3, I believe? There you go. Thank you. Good afternoon. In this presentation, we're going to talk about 4 things. One is the savings, cost savings and or budget savings from closing La Luz Elementary School. We're also going to touch on the right sizing prevailing district strategy. And then we're going to go through the cost benefit analysis of both Corrales and Janet Kahn's conversion from elementary schools to K-8 schools.
Thank you.
Next page, please. So on the savings from La Luz, their budget for next year was $1.8 million. We are going to have 3.75 FTE follow the kids to MacArthur. And that cost is 0.3 million. It's 3 teachers, a half of a nurse, and 3 teachers, a quarter of a nurse, and a half of a counselor are going to follow the kids to MacArthur. So we're not going to save that money, but the balance, the difference is what we're going to save, which is the 1.5 million. The really good news is that we were able to place all remaining staff at other vacant positions in the district that were already budgeted for.
Okay.
On the lease side, we will receive between $103,000 and $128,000 in lease revenue from the charter school. This is not negotiable. There are rules around this where it is based on enrollment, and that money will be recorded in a capital fund. That will not be an operational revenue item. We're also going to take the utilities and the maintenance and the landscaping of La Luz Elementary School. APS will incur the cost, but then we will turn around and build a charter school on actuals. So it'll just be a wash. And we're estimating the utilities to be about $40,000.
Okay.
Maintenance will be done by APS M&O. The landscaping at the facility will be done by an APS contractor. All other budgets for La Luz capital and grant funding will be redistributed to other schools, and the activity funds budget will go to MacArthur.
So I think if anybody has any questions, I think it'll be easier to just go school by school. Okay, anybody have any questions on this one? Pretty straightforward, but. Member Peterson, do you have anything to ask?
No, I think that's pretty clear. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Anything? We're good? Okay. We can go on to Corrales, I think.
We're actually going to stop for a minute and talk
Okay.
about our prevailing district strategy around right sizing. So what we're trying to do overall is to recruit and retain students. That's our goal. Historical data shows that we lose about 30 kids from Corrales, 30 kids, I'm sorry, not from Corrales, but after elementary school, we lose about 60 kids from the district when they move from 5th grade to 6th grade from these two schools. Each student we lose means $11,000 to us in SEG revenue on average. So if we are able to retain these 60 kids from 6th grade to graduation, that represents a $4.6 million increase to our revenue, which is good news. And then we will budget the corresponding expenses. So before I
So,
school, unless you have questions.
um, Chairperson Mueller-Aragon, could I ask a question? How
Yes.
many students do go to the feeder schools, which I guess are Taylor, and I forget what the other feeder school for Corrales is, but how many students do go, and how will opening up the K-8 at Corrales impact the middle schools that are receiving some of the students?
I think I'm going to defer that question to the program folks.
Ms. Peterson, what happens, these 60 are kids who actually leave the district?
Right, I understand that, but certainly some of the Corrales students do go to the feeder schools that are districted for them. So my question is, for those schools that would be receiving some of the Corrales students, how will opening up the K-8 at Corrales impact those schools that, and I understand that we lose 60 students, but we do have some that continue on at other middle schools. And I'm just wondering how it's going to impact those schools that have been receiving Corrales students.
So there should be no impact on Cibola, but on Taylor, this is what we're going to be talking about next meeting. We are actually we're going to be bringing another proposal to you where Taylor, which is the feeds to school for Corrales, and we are making a suggestion based on the boundary change that will change the situation. It's not going to be as it is right now.
So, Board Member Peterson, in the 21-22 school year, out of the students that were at Corrales that school year, 30 students left the district and 18 students went to Taylor. So those would be, those 18 students are the students that Taylor would be impacted by. But in some of the conversation we've had in right sizing, that also is reflected in the Taft Taylor Garfield discussion.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a quick question.
I look forward to that conversation.
Thank you. Go
So
ahead.
what's the current enrollment at Taylor right now?
Let me look for Dr.
I know you have all of these.
I know.
You have all these
And
numbers.
it's like moving
One more part.
dominoes because we're losing 18 students. And so I'm just curious,
in the book.
is it,
It's in the big book.
I know
it's in the big book? Okay,
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
While Dr. Blakey is looking that up, I guess my question was, what makes you so confident that all 60 of those kids will go to Corrales for K-8? And why not budget for some sort of a margin of error for 58 or so kids or 55 or?
So Board Member Board Member Gonzalez, this was actually very conservative projection based on the meetings with the community and the people who committed that they're going to be keeping the schools there.
And it's also, so the 60 is split between Corrales and Janet Kahn, right? So
Yes.
Corrales would only have to maintain 30 students, más o menos.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And to answer your question, it was 315 students.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, I know middle school is a time that, you know, for parents, that's a lot of, that causes a lot of concern for middle school. So I think that's why that's part of kids leaving. Those kids that were going to go to a private school or a Christian school or whatever are probably going to go anyway, because that's a lot of times when that happens is in middle school. So, so the only question that I kind of have on this, this strategy is, I know you said you'd budget to cover the corresponding expenses. So there is no way, or maybe there is, that the SCG revenue will ever be able to cover all those expenses. Is that correct? Okay. And I did see that, well, you'll be talking about the school, so I did, I'm just also thinking about, you know, kind of the same question that, you know, Member Gonzalez had. If, you know, 30 kids left the district from, you know, Corrales and then the other 30 from Janet Kahn, those 18, and I know you probably didn't go exactly and ask those 18 that went to Taylor, if they had, and it'd be a good question to ask, if they had or they could go back to Corrales, would they? Would those 18 kids, if there was, you know, if it was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, would those kids go, would their parents have them go back to Corrales?
We have not asked them that question.
Okay. It'd be interesting to know, and then I think it'd speak a little bit to what Member Peterson was also asking. Okay. Go ahead.
So we are on page 5, I believe. So before we get into the numbers, I just wanted to be clear on what our assumptions are behind the numbers, because the assumptions will drive the numbers, right? So I wanted to make sure that we were clear that the additional revenue does not include anything to do with pre-K. And it also does not include any SEG unit value increases beyond FY24. And I'll tell you why in a minute. The additional expenses include 7 additional regular ed teachers, 1 assistant principal, 0.5 nurse, 0.5 counselor, 0.5 librarian, middle school SAT chair and testing coordinator, increase in principal salary from elementary school to a K-8 school, and middle school differentials around activities, intramurals, department chairs, and team leads. What the additional expenses do not include are, again, pre-K, special ed disability teachers, special ed gifted teachers, SPED EAs, whether they're classroom or one-on-one, custodians, employee salary increases beyond FY24, non-salary at $66 per student, food services, and transportation. Now, the reason that I didn't include employee salary increases beyond FY24 was because it wouldn't be fair to include those expenses if I didn't include increases in revenue to fund those salary increases. And whereas it's easy to project salary increases, it isn't so easy to predict the unit value increase. So I left them out of both sides, if that makes sense. Okay. And then the last assumption we wanted to be clear about is the numbers reflect our current budgeting methodology. We haven't moved into the space yet of the student-based budgeting.
Okay. Gee, I mean, this is probably, I probably shouldn't ask it, but Do you have like any idea what those expenses, like, approximately what they could be for the SPED disability teachers and gifted teachers?
I know what they are on a per FTE basis, but it's also really hard to determine how many special ed kids
There will end
will
up being,
show up. So I know what they are individually. For example, a special ed teacher is going to be $91,000. A special ed EA is going to be $37,000.
okay,
A custodian will be $53,000.
okay. Any questions on this slide? No,
I'm having to process it. It's still like, it's a lot.
I mean, I understand about, why you said you're excluding them, but then you are including certain expenses, but not those that are kind of, in my opinion, important. And I understand that we don't know how many special ed kids we have, but we also don't know how many regular ed kids we're going to have for sure. So
Absolutely, that's
Right.
correct. But given the projections of enrollment, I can project the number of regular ed teachers, I guess is the difference.
Okay. If anybody thinks about anything after you're done processing, we will go back. Okay, go ahead.
So on page 6 is where we get into the cost benefit analysis for Corrales. So the top line is our projection for total enrollment that will include elementary school as well as middle school. The second line is the cumulative number of middle school students that we are going to or are projecting to retain in the district. And that's where that 30 kids per year comes in. And then the third line is the cumulative number of total middle school. So at the end of the day, we are projecting to have 150 kids in 6th, 7th, and 8th total. The additional SEG revenue is $11,000 per student. And after 5 years, we will see $3 million in additional SEG revenue. The expenses that we talked about in the assumptions, that will drive $3.9 million. And we will see a difference between additional revenue and expenses of negative $900,000. However, if you look at the bottom line for FY 27 and 28, it is positive. So once we break even from the losses in the first 3 years, we will be looking at a break even on a recurring basis.
Okay, so that you're pretty confident that should continue. Okay. Any questions on these numbers? Nope. Okay, we're speeding right ahead. Okay, Janet Kahn.
Okay, so the assumptions are similar, but there are a couple of differences. The assumptions are largely the same, except for the additional expenses include 9 regular ed teachers here versus 7. And the difference here is that at Janet Kahn, we will have more middle school elective teachers, 1 in 7th grade and 1 in 8th grade, whereas Corrales will not. That's one difference. And then the other difference is that we've added professional development specific to magnet schools in this particular cost benefit analysis for Janet Kahn.
Okay. Anything on this one? We're processing.
Yeah.
So then, okay, so this is different because we are having the elective teachers quicker here than at Corrales. So once it becomes a true middle school, then that will also add to the cost, won't it? If you're going to have.
At Corrales?
So at Corrales, you'll see they school is choosing to keep 6th grade as an elementary
Correct.
model.
Right.
So that's why their electives are only added in 7th and 8th grade. In Janet Con, they're making electives starting in sixth grade as a middle school. So they have an increased number of teachers needed because they are moving to the middle school model in sixth grade. So overall, what we see is that middle school is a more expensive model to run because you have more they're changing teachers for content and they're changing teachers for electives. So since Corrales is keeping one grade in elementary, there is a little bit less of cost than what you'll see in Janet Con because middle schools are more expensive to run.
So the cost for seventh and eighth grade only won't be as much as obviously for sixth, seventh and eighth grade, but there will be once they add seventh grade and eighth grade at Corrales and they'll be adding the electives, then we'll start seeing that cost.
Correct. So
Will
that's
go up.
indicated on here that you'll see, I think the projection of teachers at Corrales are like two
Wow.
teachers less than Janet Con because they're keeping sixth grade as a one-room elementary model.
I have a quick question on Janet Con because it's going to be a magnet school as well. So is there any, what's the word I'm trying to look for, the phrase of just, I guess, sort of cost to scale, because would those students participate at different grade levels across the pieces in the arts? You're always keeping kids separated, but is there any what's the benefit of having it then as a K-8 if the students are really not integrated, I guess, through the arts programs, or are they integrated throughout? I'm just curious about that.
So, board member Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Benefit to scale is what I'm thinking, is like just for the kids. Yeah.
So in this school, you're seeing a little bit of increase in cost. For one example is professional development. And to be a magnet school, their theme is integrated arts. So we have to ensure that the school is providing the experience that we're marketing. And part of that also in a magnet school is to showcase and have family engagement. So there would be activities, school-wide activities that they would be involved in K-8. So that would be one example. And then also right now we're able to do some cost savings by having some elementary teachers actually teach some sixth grade courses. So it will always be in the back of our minds to be efficient with the funds when implementing the school. And it's going to take some time to kind of figure those things out, but it will be something that we'll be mindful of to ensure that we're using funds according and most efficiently.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm trying to think ahead in terms of what's the experience for families, right? In the experience of Janet Con K-8 is because it is a magnet school. I would assume that there would be, there would be some benefit for us to having your child all the way from K-8. And I'm hoping that there would be some, like you said, some benefit with some of the teachers in specialization, especially being able to cut across all those grades.
And that's why you're seeing additional elective teachers, music, art, and dance want to ensure that the student experience is enriched at this school.
All right.
Okay.
I had a related question to Janet Con, primarily about funding for just arts workforce. So I understand we're in the process of phase 4, I think, of the fine arts expansion, which is funded currently by HB2 in the legislature. But do we have funding for phase 5? And what are the implications for continuing to expand arts district-wide, but also being able to fund the art workforce that we need at Janet Con?
Currently, we'll probably be seeking the funding in the next legislative session for the expansion, because there was some in this one, so we hope it continues.
So by seeking that would be like part of our legislative agenda for the next year.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thanks. Okay. I don't know if Member Peterson is still with us, but chime in if you are. If not,
I was cutting in and out, but I am listening. So thank you.
okay. All right. On to the next slide then.
Okay. Slide 8 is our last slide. This is the cost benefit financials for Janet Kahn. On the first line here, I have the capacity for Janet Kahn as a total K-8 school at 600. Their total enrollment that we project for elementary and mid hits 506 in FY27, and then we will take another look at it in FY28. The cumulative number of middle school students retained in the district in this model, the financials represent 75, but of course we will be aggressively recruiting for more, and the cumulative number of total middle school students is 115 today. That's what the numbers are based on. So our SEG revenue incrementally from student retention at $11,000 per student after 5 years is $2.3 million. Our additional expenses are a little higher than Corrales, given the 2 elective teachers and the PD, and that comes in at 3.8 for a difference of 1.4.
Okay. So what's the highest enrollment that we've had at Janet Kahn? So we're currently at 331, or that's where we're at, and we're hoping that middle school's going to take us up to the 506?
So as of right now, the highest Janet Kahn was in 2017-18, they had 473 students,
Okay.
and that's kindergarten through 5th grade.
Okay.
So this is adding 6th, 7th, and 8th each year. So I think that the team decided to be very conservative about the numbers to make sure that we're looking at kind of if things were to maintain really the boundary of where it's happening now. But remember, we
Made it open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we made it open so to recruit more students from throughout the city. So I know Mr. Garcia is working with the administration that this shows the importance of getting the recruitment up as part of being a magnet school that makes it very different than a traditional neighborhood school, that the enrollment is crucial into the sustainability of the school.
Mm-hmm. It's all dominoes too, because if we're recruiting from other places, hopefully, I mean, close your ears, charter schools, but is that we're pulling them back from the charters back into to our schools. Because if we're taking them from the other middle schools, it's like, what's, we're not doing, there's no gain. So that's what I'm concerned about. Okay.
And that would be, I mean, that was just kind of like my question is, if we are losing kids and then we're gaining them at Janet Kahn or Corrales, where are we gaining them from? Where are we getting them from? That is an important question to answer, I think.
I think for Corrales, what we do know is that there are several private schools in the area as well as charter schools in Corrales. So we can pretty much see where the students are going. I think that Janet Kahn may be a different scenario, and I don't know, Mr. Garcia, I think that the Janet Kahn recruiting efforts is looking at district-wide to recruit students from outside the district back in, whereas the Corrales recruiting is more retaining the Corrales community to be able to stay in the school.
I think what's exciting about Janet Kahn is the beautiful facility that has just been completed. I mean, it's state of the art. And when you couple that with rigor and relevance and an interest and passion from students and staff, our hope is that we create an epicenter for fine arts in the district. I've been working with Gina Rodzinski.
Mhm.
We're also looking at adding the Kennedy Center Any Given Child program and teaching artists at this site. So we can't guarantee that we're not going to recruit some APS kids, but our hope is to retain the ones that might otherwise leave, in addition to find students who are outside of the district that have this interest and really provide that student experience. In addition, really creating this epicenter of fine arts, K-8 in our district, having all of our fine arts professional developments, K-8 at this school, really creating a community of artists. And then also through Any Given Child, having actual teaching artists from the community come in and give lessons. So we think it's going to take a little time to build this model, but once we actually get to see students exhibit all that they learn, it's going to be quick that it fills.
I think it was in 2018, maybe it was 2017, in the Voice of the Community survey that went out to families about options. The arts was very well articulated as something that families were interested in. So I think that using that data is what's kind of driven the need for that parents and students are looking for this. And I think what Mr. Garcia is also looking at is how we can help to address the 5th to 6th grade cliff that we see in the district of students leaving from 5th to 6th grade. So district-wide, would this model be something that families would find that maybe they would have stayed? It could impact maybe in elementary school, but in middle school, they were going to leave the district. So this could help in retaining them in the district for middle school by choosing to go to Janet Kahn for the K-8.
Well, I'm a big fan of fine arts, so. So then my question, I don't know if you can answer this now. I don't know if Ms. Hicks can answer this. So if you're looking at, La Luz and Corrales and Janet Kahn and, the changes and, you did this cost benefit analysis. Had we left everything the way it was, okay, then we look at how it was and how it's going to be. So we really are saving money, or is it really going to end up costing more? Just honest truth.
It really depends on the enrollment. It really depends on if we can get the kids back.
And so there aren't that many kids that we need to get back. So if we get the kids back, then it will end up costing us less with this change than had we left it how it was.
I could look into that a little bit deeper and get back to you.
Okay. I mean, that's just very important for me to know, to answer to the community, because what is out there is, okay, you all are doing this to right size to the enrollment, right? Infrastructure to enrollment. That's what you're trying to do. So in almost everybody's head, they are thinking it's going to save money. And I just want to be able to answer, if I could get that answer quickly, because I'm going to be reporting out next week. So if you could just let us know if it really is and what kind, I know you can't ever be definitive about what that number is, but it would be important for us to be able to tell the community, yes, this is really going to save us this much, approximately this much money. And if it's not, it's better. I mean, people are very happy to spend money on children, but they would rather have us tell them straight up what it is.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And I think you're bringing up a good point, which we've talked about as a committee too, is how do you balance the price of not doing anything and just letting, whether it's financial or meeting the needs of the community, right? So how do we balance that? This is what we're hearing from families. This is what Corrales is saying about staying K-8. So how do we manage balancing providing options for the community with making sure that it's negated against the price of doing nothing to just maintain status quo? So I think that each situation that we've talked about are really unique in ways too. So you'll see in the closure of La Luz, that's a very efficient, here's what we're going to do with the property, provide this to students to be able to utilize. And then there's how do we expand arts for the magnet school to grow? So there's all these different, so I think Ms. Hicks and her team can get you the concrete numbers against the price of not doing anything.
Right. I mean, because when anybody would look at this and go, well, this is going to be costing us, this is going to be costing us more. I mean, that's how it looks, which may not really be the case, but that's when you just look at the numbers, that's what it looks like.
Because what we need to articulate is I like visualize a graph of the students leaving, what that cliff is every year of whether it's at this school or any school, right? That's how many students we're leaving. It's going to go negative. I think looking at the middle school as a cost, any middle school we pull that's at a certain number of students is going to show that it's costing more because it's the way that we're trying to fund having those electives for students in the middle school experience, which is more expensive. But as a district as a whole, we're able to use our leverage of some schools that are operating more efficiently to balance the schools that are under-enrolled.
Okay, I'll look forward to seeing those numbers. Any other questions?
Just a bit of a follow-up as it relates to middle school overall, because we've sort of talked about that's the point where there's the leak in the pipeline. So we can plug the holes here and there, but unless we're doing something holistically, we're going to continue to leak kids at that point. So I'm curious for an update on the middle school task force and how that might fit into both the right sizing conversation, but also the broader budgeting conversation and how we're thinking about, is it leading to any potential changes in the middle school model? How are we thinking about better serving those students? Just sort of, can we have an update on the middle school task force?
So good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. Yes, Board Member Gonzalez, we have met and come up with some recommendations for middle school redesign, looking specifically at, what are the reasons why our families are opting out at the middle school, in different mechanisms. We have found they're afraid of just kind of that sense of safety. They're going from a one-room classroom to a space where kids are having to then navigate an entire school and changing classes. So middle school in and of itself is a big transition. We've looked at what does the transition time look like when we do a freshman jumpstart day for ninth graders to get into the school prior to everybody being in the school, to get to meet their teachers and interact and do some team building activities with one another, to walk their schedules so they know where their classes are to alleviate some of that anxiety. We're looking at that for middle school as well. Having some family engagement nights to inform families what their feeder middle school has to offer. And looking specifically, one of the recommendations is going to be flexible scheduling. So we have time for teachers to collaborate on if they're in English and social studies, they're doing more project-based learning, competency-based learning, so that it doesn't just continue to be what it has been in that kind of traditional setting, giving schools that autonomy to be flexible in what that looks like, to combine, to do the project-based. And then we will be bringing forth our recommendations. We've had a lot going on, and so we were waiting for the time. So I think it would be good to plan maybe at our next meeting to bring forth the middle school redesign recommendations for discussion, and then get feedback to take back to the committee if there's certain things that you all want us to work on that are not included in those recommendations.
Thank you.
I think one of the best practices in middle school that I think has been talked about and very much reflected in the budget, that I think as a team, we're going to have to decide if it's something we want to invest in with our middle school children, is in teaming. And there's a lot of research that shows that in middle school, being part of a team and restructuring the school to be able to do that is really important to the student's success in middle school. And a few years ago, we were requiring middle schools to be on a team. and then we had a big, like a family. And then that's a nice way to say the family. And then we had the big budget cliff of 20, name the year 17, 18. And that was one of the inefficiencies budget wise. But we've seen that in cutting that from middle school budgets, it really impacts the middle school model of effectiveness that we know needs to be done. So looking at how we can adjust the budget for middle schools, and maybe with Renette's team in the new student-based budgeting, this might allow for that kind of opportunity for middle schools to put those best practices back in.
And so echoing what Dr. Blakey just mentioned, the family model, which I know has been implemented at some point and then went away due to budget cuts because it does cost more money to have your core instructional core academic content teachers together with as pure of a student population group as possible. And then, but at that, then we have different sizes of middle schools as well. And that impacts things. But I know that from my experience as a middle schooler, I was on the Trailblazer family, and we had our teachers, and there were a lot of thematic projects that took place within each of the families. And it was a good time for teachers then to have that collaboration time as well, so that they can meet and discuss common students, any type of behaviors, interventions, instructional planning would take place during that time. And so with the middle school task force, when we look at when we're losing students, how do we put things in place? Another recommendation is prioritizing support FTE. So when we look at each middle school, we should be prioritizing them for a school counselor, a school social worker, a nurse, community school coordinator. Like there's these pieces that if it's truly a place where we're wanting to invest our time and energy and resources, then we need to do that. And so that is also another recommendation. Of course, it's just money, but it's where are our priorities and how do we shift what we're doing to align better with engaging that specific population. So I have it here on my notes to get back with the middle school task force to be able to bring forth the recommendations to you all. We have them written out. So if it's not presenting them to you at a meeting, we can get Ms. King to send them to you, and then you guys can provide questions and input.
Great. Thank you.
Because it'd be good to know, I mean, if you ask the question, why are we losing those kids? Like, do we know why we're losing the kids? It can't just be safety. There have to be other things besides that. And looking at what are best practices, what schools across the nation, middle schools, they keep those kids from elementary in their neighborhood school. Like, what do they do? Do schools, middle schools that keep the sixth graders more as elementary students like Corrales is going to, are those kids, those schools, do they keep them? I mean, that'd be interesting to ask that question. I know there are other schools. I know when my children went to, didn't go to the traditional public school in our neighborhood, how they did it is they like slowly made them into real middle schoolers. So it was like they had, I think it was like their English and history teacher or something were the same, like core, it was the same person. So they only ended up having basically two teachers. So the science and math, it was one teacher. And then obviously to go to PE and things like that. Like, does that work? And would that help keep those middle schoolers in our schools?
And absolutely. I mean, I think transitions are difficult to begin with, and I think transition has a lot to do with it. And it is fear of the unknown, whether it's safety or anything else, just getting to know new situations and new adults, new students coming together for the first time. It is a time of anxiety, and as parents, wanting to make sure that your child can navigate that. So I think it's up to us to create those situations where we are providing that students can and families can enter the school and associate themselves with it and learn about it and feel like they can be a part of our schools, and that they're exciting places to be, where our teachers are excited to welcome them and help them grow. But I think we do need to create those conditions and those practices so that we can create a seamless transition versus they transition and we cross our fingers, hopefully they have a good experience.
And if it costs money, but it's better for the kids and it's money well spent.
And I think with the task force, my basis for them was reach for the stars. Like, let's look for what is going to highly impact our middle schools so that, our students and families are not opting out, they're opting in and they're excited. And so some of these things, like I say, it costs money, but we need to start thinking about, where are we putting our dollars, and let's see if we do align it with our middle schools and creating robust, exciting places for our kids, then we're probably going to see outcomes in a few years.
Okay. And then Dr. Segura, do you ask that question when they don't go to our APS schools? Is that question asked of them? I know it's kind of hard once they're gone.
I think that is something that we have not collected data on, and maybe I'm wrong. So if I'm incorrect, please correct me. Those opportunities where kids, they kind of choose to come back for registration. I think there's missed opportunities where we can get the families at the end of the school year and the students to have those conversations, to introduce and have the, middle school come and present, to get the families and students aware and excited about where they're headed next. So I think there are some missed opportunities, not just in APS. I think in many different places where, middle school has been that neglected piece, and we're seeing the ramifications of that now. But there are really great teachers and things happening in our middle schools, and we're not telling those stories enough. And I think if we emphasize those and then, like I said, create those transitional opportunities for our students and families and teachers and staff to come together, I think it will bridge that level of fear of transition as well.
I mean, if we all are honest and we kind of look at our middle schools, I look at John Adams, looks like when I went to school in the 70s, so it's like, you fund what you treasure and what's important, and maybe we need to really think about that with our middle schoolers.
And I think in the most recent data we collected through the strategic plan, I think we heard very clearly that our students want more rigor, and that they were kind of bored in some of their classes. And so I think looking at that too in the middle school level and how we can increase what is being asked of middle school students, I think could also help in what we have heard from parents and from students. I think the important thing is that we've heard from students that they want more in their classrooms. And so as we look at our middle school classrooms, I think as a district holding those classrooms accountable to what our students are asking for and making sure that the middle school experience is not just fun, but challenging to students and that they feel that, I think would be a step in the right direction in recruiting and retaining our students.
Great, thank you so much.
This is Barbara. I completely lost everyone for a little bit, but I'm back on. And I'm sorry, I just am at the tail end of this conversation. I'm really happy to hear about transitions because I think we're not intentional enough. I mean, I think about the number of Bandelier students that are lost because somehow they have the idea that they can't go to Wilson. And I think if we did a lot more of that bridging so that they see the opportunities at Wilson, it would greatly diminish the number of students that we lose. And so I do really appreciate that intentionality. The one thing that I wanted to add is to caution against rigor doesn't just mean making it harder. It really means making it more engaging. And I think the more we work at listening to students, for what they want and what they need. And that means content, not just expecting more, but really and truly giving them content that feeds them, that feeds their interest, that opens up their curiosity. So it's just, I worry sometimes that rigor gets simplified and not enriched. So thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. And we will move, our next item for discussion is going to be the Taranis Early Childhood Consolidation.
We're going to switch our themes up a little bit.
Okay.
for this item. Wait, Esito, can I come back? What's that? We're just in the literature. Okay, so in looking at Taranis Early Childhood consolidation, when we're looking at early childhood in general for APS, we're looking at research that indicates that if students have a real high quality experience in pre-K, that they're going to be more successful as they progress through their the grade levels in elementary through secondary, and that they're going to need less supports and intervention throughout that experience. If we look at research from National Institute for Early Education Research, it states that they'll also have fewer instances or engagements with the justice system and have higher earnings as adults. And so obviously we know we want that for every single one of our kids. And then we also know that children who are coming from situations of poverty, that they have the most to gain from these high quality early childhood experiences as well, to help them be successful in school, which then has the opportunity to strengthen their economic security as well as their families. And so as a district, we look specifically at how do we ensure kindergarten readiness as part of all of this right sizing and looking at pre-K in general for APS. How do we ensure that kindergarten readiness for every child is occurring in Albuquerque by age 5? Universal access to quality pre-K, providing robust comprehensive services to developmental preschool children, providing wraparound services to those children, and that is inclusive of collaborating with our community partners for before and after school, and then recruiting, retaining, and preparing our pre-K students. When we look at that and how it fits into our goals and guardrails for the district, we're looking specifically at the percentage of third grade students, which is our goal 1. And their levels of proficiency for reading for ELA. Interim goal 1.1, which is the percentage of kindergarten students who are demonstrating proficiency in the ELA summative assessment. And guardrails 1 and 2, not allowing the district to operate with inequitable distribution of school and or community-based wraparound and support systems, as well as not allowing resources to be allocated inequitably. Looking at the strategic plan, one of our strategic priorities is responsive and coordinated systems. So establishing clear district systems for managing resources and communicating and supporting schools and families in a way that authentically responds to our students' needs. That goes down to central office leaders aligning and designing a student-based budgeting process so that the schools can they can fund their staffing allocations based upon student needs and not strictly on enrollment, and then align district-wide expectations for programming. Within the design phase, develop a recurring process and supportive guidance and tools to readily assess key factors and develop recommendations related to APS financial sustainability due to student enrollment patterns, building usage, etc. And so when we look at the future of early childhood in APS, we're looking at the repurposing of Duranis Elementary into an early childhood center as a result of the closure of La Luz Elementary and the consolidation of pre-K and special ed pre-K to Duranis Elementary, as well as the inclusion of pre-K within the existing public education framework per the 2022 New Mexico Constitutional Amendment. Also, APS Early Childhood is part of a comprehensive district-wide strategy, is looking at leveraging federal funds for the repurposing of Duranis Elementary into a universal early childhood center as a pilot for possible future early childhood programmatic expansion. We are looking at piloting this so we can create a model before we scale it. I would now like to have the honor of introducing our new Executive Director of Early Childhood for APS, Miss Allison Gabaldon. And then we also have with us Dr. Melanie Blea, who oversees our special ed pre-K programming and supports. So I'm going to turn it over to them, and thank you both for being here.
And thank you so much, Dr. Segura. Board members, thank you for allowing us to be here and part of this meeting this evening. The next slide shows the representation of early childhood programs currently throughout the 4 zones. So you can see that right there. I think everybody got a giant version of it because it's kind of hard to see on a little tiny screen. So you can see that we have pre-K programs throughout the zones. There's more pre-K programs in zones 1 and zone 2 and less pre-K programs in zone 3 and zone 4, which is kind of what the information on the next slide shows. The information on the next slide shows kind of how many New Mexico pre-K classrooms we have throughout the district and how many developmental preschool classroom sites we have throughout the district. There are approximately 10,400 3- and 4-year-olds in Albuquerque Public Schools district within the district boundaries. That's how many 3- and 4-year-olds have been identified. In 22-23, APS served around 2,160 3- and 4-year-olds with combined New Mexico pre-K classrooms and developmental preschool classrooms. So
just to stop you real quick. So I know these are ours. These are our preschools.
Yes.
But do you have, or is there any way that you can find out like how many community-based programs there are in each of the zones?
Yes, that's something I'm working on. I am a lead director with the CNM Mentor Director Network. And so we are partnering. I'm very much involved in partnering with the community-based programs and the private-based preschool programs and the City of Albuquerque programs.
Okay.
So we are working on unifying our programs so that we can serve the most students as possible. Instead of competing with one another, we want to work on uniting with one another.
Okay, thank you.
So just to add on to that, with a new department, I think it's the ECDC. We have a database because their database is also a little bit incomplete because they are a new department. We did a geocode from the data they gave us preliminarily, and there's about 365 that we know. But Ms. Gabaldon coming on and working with them comprehensively, we'd like to bring to you what is actually a real manifestation of how many community providers there are. What we could see was about 365, but we want to give you a proper kind of comprehensive outlook and then validate that with a new department also.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if I may, special education teachers are already in 68 of these community centers providing inclusion support. So we already have existing relationships with at least 68, and that was only from this school year. That doesn't include historically the relationships we've had, whether students have qualified for special education or not.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have any questions about this slide?
I guess I have a question about long-term goals. So this seems to imply there's a total universe of students available that we could have, and yet we also have the Pre-K Act, which dictates that 50% should be in community-based settings. So what, given that, like, we could cut this 10,400 in half, or we could establish goals over a certain number of years. I'm curious if you have goals, like what could the enrollment trends look like? And
Yes, we do have long-term goals. Kavita, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, in the long-term goal. So one of the
in short term, please.
Sure. So, so starting with some short-term and midterm goals, given the universe of what we've got, and given the capacity of the community, not just APS, this is private providers, this is public providers. Everybody has to have hands on deck if we are going to be able to even have some kind of dent into this kind of universe over the next 5 to 10 years. And so in getting together a pilot of how we may do it, and not just APS, because I think if you look at the universe, we're not even talking about 0 to 3, because that's part of that universe. We're not talking about before and after care. We have to absolutely look at what our partners are doing, what they're capable of, and in getting together a pilot. And Ms. Gabaldon will talk about the design committee that we'd like to bring all our prospective partners and the vested interests together so that we can have a technical discussion of what a center will look like and what the roles will be given the unfolding situation of the new constitutional amendment and as the rules get to be determined. Because this is, it's kind of new territory here. Not kind of, it is new territory. Down to the new department, down to how many kids can be served. We had talked about doing a session that's just going to be early childhood, but hopefully we can have that later on after we have kind of coalesced with our partners and developed some kind of matrix as to how we shall move forward. Because it's pretty difficult, not even going into things like staffing. We have problems with staffing with regular ed, leave alone DPC. How are we going to create more staff and all that? So I don't know if Allison, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, so I'm actively working with CNM. I was part of the committee that helped create the CNM alternative licensure program for early childhood. And so there is an alternative licensure pathway to train more early childhood teachers and to recruit more early childhood teachers. We're also working with CNM that a possibility for the Duranis Hub is that it could be a practicum center for early childhood teachers. So the teachers could have mentor teachers at the site and be doing their practicums there at the site.
Sorry, I think in answer to your specific question about the goal, I think that what Mr. Wajinje was saying is that we could very easily say, okay, so it's 10,000. So next year we're going to do 4,000, the next year 5,000. But they really want to step back and meet with the providers and come up with a like Albuquerque goal for how many preschool students they're going to take in as a group, rather than APS coming in and saying, we're going to take 5,000. How are you guys going to divvy the rest? So instead, the short-term and long-term goals are going to be made in collaboration with the Early Childhood Center Committee that is later in the packet.
And I don't know if we want to jump to that page. What page is it?
I want to. Okay.
16.
Did you get your question answered? So we can just stick on this page. So
Not really. I understand why we can't set goals yet, and I agree that it makes sense to set the goals in collaboration with the early childhood community. So that is good. I do just sort of have an overall cart before the horse question, as if we don't know what point on the horizon we're marching toward, how do we get there? So we can go into the rest of the details and continue on, but I think in order for us as a collective board to make any decisions around financial investments, particularly related to Duranus capital changes, I think we have to have a better sense of where we're headed. So that's all.
Thank you for that, because I think in addition to knowing where we're headed, I need to understand where we are, aside of just having the sites, because I understand the sites here, but there's a real distinction between us and a private site in terms of the way we operate, correct?
So there has been historically, yes, there has been a big difference. ECECD has made some changes to educational requirements of our private and community providers, such as all educational assistants need to be working towards an associate's degree, and all teachers that are being funded by the New Mexico Pre-K grant have to have at least a bachelor's degree. That is for community and private school providers. For school-based providers, all teachers have to have a PED license of early childhood. That's what has set us apart, has been that we've always had to have that licensure requirement, where the private school and community sector programs have only had to be working towards a bachelor's degree.
But it's also in the practicality of how they're run, right? Because ours currently run a school schedule. There's no before and after.
Some sites do have before and after school care. It just depends. I'm working with our before and after school providers right now. When I was the principal at Kirtland, I was working with our on-site before and after school provider to get her license changed so that she could provide before and after school wraparound services for students starting at 4 years old, because the before and after school license is for 5 to 12 years old. And so we're working with ECECD on understanding that school doesn't start at 5 years old anymore. School starts at 4 years old. For many of our sites that have pre-K programs. So that is something that we're working on. Traditionally, the wraparound services could only serve students from 5 to 12 years old, because before 5 years old was considered like childcare programs. And there was different regulations that had to be followed in order to get that license.
So, and this is, in alignment with Board Member Gonzalez's question. So really, is our vision to go to 3 and 4?
So our vision right now is to partner with our community programs, and we're focusing on making the best 4-year-old program that we have, right? So we're focusing on making the best 4-year-old program that we have to get our children ready and to be successful in kindergarten and throughout their educational career with Albuquerque Public Schools. Many of our community programs are wanting to focus on 3-year-olds. So we want to partner with them, right? In Albuquerque, we don't have to be the one-stop shop for everything, right? We need to partner with our community programs, and we need to see what everybody's strengths are. And it might be easier for such as the city of Albuquerque or community programs to service those 3 or Head Start, YDI, to service the 3-year-olds, and for us to focus on the 4-year-olds. So I think that's something that we really need to partner with. That's why we want to develop this committee and really partner with our community to see what can we do as a community to service all of the students, all the 3 and 4-year-old students in Albuquerque. I think if we start focusing on, oh, we want to do 3-year-olds, oh, we want to do infant toddler, oh, we want to do before birth, right? We're cutting ourselves too thin, right? Let's get really good at 4-year-olds, right? And then we can decide what we want to do from there. Besides, I'm sorry, Dr. Blea, but we also, of course, serve our 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds with special education students. Yes.
Okay. I don't know if Member Peterson is on there, or we lost her. Maybe we lost her.
So again, just to circle back, so the majority of our programs do not have before and after. It's just strictly just a 4-year-old program that runs a school schedule. So if it's elementary, they start at whatever time.
Yep.
We don't know what time they start.
They start
7:30-ish.
7:35.
7:35, and And it ends right
Yeah.
at 3.
So our pre-K programs are 6.5-hour instructional days.
Okay.
That is per the instructional requirement of the ECECD in order to get the New Mexico Pre-K grant, which funds all of our New Mexico pre-K programs in Albuquerque Public Schools.
Okay. So it seems to me like families that have chosen us
Exactly.
for this. I mean, I'm thinking of just some of the families that I know. I mean, they're not ready for their 4-year-old to be, they're still close to the family. So there's capacity for them to like make sure they're just there for that 6.5-hour day because they want to go somewhere. They go either to grandma's house or they go someplace else. But I'm curious about the number of families that we have here that are actually enrolling in something after that because because school gets out and they still have to go somewhere else. So have we surveyed our families?
So I think we're in the process of doing that. I know
Okay.
from my experience as a school principal, many of my pre-K students got picked up by their family members at the end of the day. We had probably about maybe 15-20% that went to an after-school program like La Petite or, Little Flower daycare that came and picked up students from our school and took them to their site until 6 p.m. when mom and dad could pick them up afterwards.
It's
So
less of a childcare day, so it's not as expensive. but
if I
there's
may
some-
speak a little bit on the short-term goal, a lot of the short-term goals in early childhood, specifically around special ed, are inclusive practices. But what I mean by that, I think maybe to get to your point, board member, is that transportation, for example, right now, we're not there where we can transport students, which can potentially be a barrier. So when we look at inclusive practices, it's not only can these students eat in the cafeteria with everybody else, but can they ride the same bus, because then that breaks down the barrier. So a lot of it has to do with what can we do in special ed, because that's a separate pot of funds. We already do really well. We pick students up from daycare. Well, how can we include transportation or some other barriers moving forward to ensure that we can service and have a quality A1 program for our 4-year-olds?
Mhm. Okay.
And also board members are like Dr. Blair and Ms. Gabaldon to kind of espouse a little bit on the different paradigm that's there now versus, if the reason we showed you the map was that if you look at the location of the existing programs, it was based on an eligibility kind of requirement, which is now very different. It was an eligibility requirement that was based mostly on income. Now, we've done, and when we get there in a few months, and we really go deep into early childhood after we've had the committee with our partners, and hopefully we shall present together with them at that time, you shall see that the way the distribution of early childhood centers doesn't really reflect the population of available 3- and 4-year-olds. It reflects where the eligibility profile matched with what was going on. But most of the kids, 3- and 4-year-olds, are in the Northwest and the Northeast. And that's not where you find the centers right now. And this is an issue that will have to be addressed by everybody, not just APS.
Board members, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if you can see Barbara Peterson has her hand up and Courtney Jackson has joined.
Oh, good. Okay. Are you
Can I ask a
finished?
follow-up question real quick before we go to Member Peterson? Just in follow-up to the question around, are we going to serve 3s or are we going to serve 4s, and how are we going to find out, and when does that relate? When and how does that relate to the Duranis expansion? I'm curious, since this is funded through ECECD and we have to apply for funds through grants from them, how are we sequencing that? Are we applying for a grant for funding for 3s and 4s, just 4s? Are we not sure?
So the grant was due April 28th. And we applied for just 4-year-olds. When I first came on as the senior director of early childhood, I surveyed some of our current preschool teachers, and our current preschool teachers are not open at this time to possibly serving 3-year-olds. They are kind of terrified of changing diapers, right? And their thought process is, we want to teach pre-K, not necessarily, we don't want to do daycare, right? And so I understand that. And so that's one of the reasons why we didn't apply for the 3 and 4-year-old grant this year, is because we really wanted to focus on that 4-year-old population and really, like Kizito had pointed out, we want to retain our teachers, right? I don't want to say, oh, now all of our programs are 3 and 4-year-olds and scare some of our teachers off. That we want to make sure that we retain and we want to make sure we have high quality 4-year-old programs.
Okay.
And so our grant is due every year. Every year the grant is due. It's usually released like March 31st, and then it's usually due sometime before the end of April. And so as a planning committee, this early childhood planning committee, in the planning process, and Kizito can speak more to this, but the planning process for the next year starts like in September, where we sit down and we talk about what.
So next year we might apply for 3s and 4s, but for this year, we're already funded just for 4s.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, Member Peterson, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of the steps we're taking to get this in place. There are lots of challenges, and I think just like with our other K-12 age kids, K-5 age kids, there's a whole variety of different needs on the parts of families. And somehow, the challenges are accentuated this year with the change in the schedule. And so how we go about meeting the needs for these younger children also is going to be really critical to make sure they have affordable and safe places for before and after school. But I think we can do it. I think we can find the partners to make it really successful. So somehow in some of the debate around this, I think we've lost sight sometimes of the fact that over and over again, we hear that one of the huge obstacles for our students is the lack of preschool. And that in a lot of the studies that have been done, the reason why so many of our kids struggle K-12 is that they're not getting that foundation of language and enriching experiences when they're younger. So I just feel like we can never say too much how important it is to pursue this goal. And I really appreciate the work that's being done and the inclusion of some people who really understand what good early childhood programs are, and really look forward to having that conversation continue. So thank you.
Thank you. Member Jackson, go ahead.
No.
I didn't have any questions.
A quick
Did
question.
member, okay.
I'm just here.
Oh, well, we're glad you're here. Okay, Member Montoya Cordova, go ahead.
On these, you've given us what the vacancies are and what the enrollment is. What's the capacity?
Okay, so for New Mexico Pre-K, we are currently funded for 1,365 students. However, that number also includes the 3 charter schools that are under our umbrella for providing New Mexico Pre-K as well. So our total enrollment could be that 1212. That can be our total enrollment piece for New Mexico Pre-K.
Okay, here we go for special ed. Get your processing hat on. Developmental preschool, we run 2 sessions a day, 2 half-day sessions. So the total capacity is 16 for a given teacher. So for example, if you look at Collette Park, there's a number 10 there, which means that we had room for an additional 10 students should they qualify. However, we had to open a second program at that site because of the need. So, I mean, obviously with special ed, if the need is there, then we open up the classrooms, we have the staff. But there are 4 different locations on this map where we had to actually open up additional programs. So even though there are vacancies, do keep that in mind.
And so we're licensed for the capacity, or it doesn't matter, just whatever
On
is
the special
available?
ed side, it's wherever,
whatever,
yes,
okay.
whatever the IEP states.
Thank
And
you.
this also does not include social communication classrooms.
Okay.
We do have several of those throughout the district.
And these are also funded through?
These are special education classrooms funded on the special ed federal side.
Okay.
Okay, so, I have stuff all over the place. So you said the enrollment was, for pre-K was 1,212, correct?
Yes.
And then the enrollment for DPC was 479, and then I kind of got whatever the IEP says. So when I'm looking at those numbers, where did the number 2160 come from? That APS served 2,160 students. So where did that number come from? Because those doesn't add up.
So that also includes the charter schools. So that also includes,
So they have that many at the 3 charter schools. Okay,
that also includes the charter schools. Yeah.
okay. And maybe you will get me this later, but so we serve 2,163 and 4-year-olds. So you will be able to give an idea about how many of these students were served by private, religious, home-based, et cetera.
So the 2,100
Is us, but I'm saying you'll be able to get the number of students that were served in a 3 or 4-year-old program.
Oh,
and
outside of us?
Correct.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay. And then I know that you said that you may use CNM students at this, that's something in your thought process to bring them into this development center. But if we have enrollment going down at CNM, is that really even like something that might be practical?
I think it is. I think it's practical because the CNM Mentor Network is continuously looking for sites for their students. They're continuously recruiting for sites to help mentor their students for practicum.
Additionally, as Allison's part of the CNM cohort, I'm part of the HERP with UNM, and we do work on placing residents in early childhood centers. And then with the residency funding that came through with the legislature, there is room for that to grow as well.
Okay, so I know, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. So APS was already fully funded, fully awarded funds already for this year?
Yes.
Okay, so for this past year, did you have to revert any funds back to the state because of the vacancies?
No, we did not have to revert any funds back to the state. We were able to use all of the funds.
Okay, and how were you able to do that?
So we were able to use funds. So the funds are per student, but they also go to the school and the cost of running the early childhood program. So we were able to use our funds. We should know. I shouldn't specifically say that we didn't have to return any funds, but we should know by the end of this month if we are going to return funds back to because the cost of the teachers' salaries and everything, not everything has come through fruition yet. And so we may end up having to revert some funds back to ECECD, but we won't know that until the end of this month.
And typically about how much is it per vacancy? What's the dollar number?
The dollar number per vacancy. So
That you may have to revert. I mean, if there is that number.
well, it depends on, because just because there was a vacancy, we still had to provide a teacher, right? So we still had to pay for the teacher salary, and we still had to pay for the EA salary, and we still had to pay for all the supplies of the classroom, and we still had to pay for all the materials of the classroom. So I don't really think you could say, I mean, ECECD says that we should be giving, we should be allocating $200 for materials and supplies per student.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's not funded exactly. We do receive a per student allocation from ECECD, but that money goes, it goes towards many things besides just each student.
So, I mean, this is just like what I understand is that when it comes to when it comes to private providers, that if they're not allowed to expand if they don't have the numbers. So is that different for APS that you can expand even though you have all these vacancies? Because that's not what happens in the private sector.
So that's not necessarily true. Every single program, private or school-based, we have to apply to open another classroom, right? And so we have to, and it's not necessarily based on all of the vacancies, but if you have the room to grow, right? And also the room of the community, the population of the community. So there's many factors that go into saying we want to open another classroom, right? Not just saying, oh, we have a wait list. But that is one thing that we are working on. I think in the past with early childhood, we didn't have unified communication with our private schools and our community programs. So we weren't able to say, hey, APS still has vacancies at this site. Is your site full? Please refer them to us. So that is something in my involvement with the Early Childhood Directors Network through CNM is really working on getting unified waiting lists so that we can work together. So if we are full at Dennis Chavez, but there is a community provider by Dennis Chavez that still has 10 spots open, we can refer to that community provider. So that is something that we are really working on, is that unification of communication between all of these programs so that we don't have vacancies in the future.
So board member Mueller Aragon, just to add on to that, I'd like Ms. Gabaldon and Dr. Blair to expound a little bit on the vacancies, the definition of vacancies, especially with DPC, and how this is related to IEP. So it might look like a vacancy, but there's certain spots they have to keep depending on prospective IEPs that might come up. So if you can go ahead.
So then it basically is that a lot of this is not awarded on the numbers. It might be awarded based on anticipation of these students having an IEP. So it's in anticipation.
Well, and I want to be very clear that the DPC part, that's federal funds. So that's completely separate. And that money comes with a student's IEP. And just like a shoe, you want it, a growing student or growing kid with a shoe, you want them to have room to grow. We want vacancies. If we don't have vacancies, we have a problem at the rate our students are qualifying. So I'll give you another example. Hodgin down here has 10 vacancies. So that's in their DPC setting. That's correct. They had room to grow and had 10 students qualify through an IEP. However, in their SCS classroom, which isn't here, they were at 150% capacity. So when we don't have room to grow, we do run into problems, and it does hinder our ability to service our students. So you want a good number of vacancies, and also just keep in mind that each DPC program has the capacity for 16 students. So you're looking at, I think everywhere except for maybe one school, that's one teacher with wiggle room. And you can kind of imagine if you have multiple classes, that's 2 to 3 students in each class. So it may look really daunting on the special ed side, but that's really almost ideal for where you want it.
And Dr. Blea, Dr. Blea, the DPC program is different in enrollment for timing. Is it that they can enroll throughout you have to keep vacancies throughout the school year?
All special ed vacancies have to be kept open throughout the year because students can qualify at any time throughout the year through Child Find.
And in New Mexico pre-K students, they need to turn 4 by September 1st. They have to turn 4 by September 1st in order to be enrolled in New Mexico pre-K.
Right. Okay. But still what I understand is when it comes to this pre-K grant, that every child is funded at $7,000 per child.
Well, it has increased.
So what is it now?
It's $10,300 per student. We received
And is that for this year, this upcoming year?
Yes. So it's $10,300 per pre-K student. So we were awarded $14,500,000 for next school year.
And so that 14 million, how many students do you need then?
So we were funded for 1,365 students. And that includes the students that are at the charter school.
So you're just funded for 1,365. So that's a number that you gave earlier, inclusive of the charter schools.
Yes.
So that is, we are able to serve those students right now in the preschools that we currently have.
Yes.
Okay, so then my question is, if we can already serve these students, and then there's the private providers, why do we need to really create an early childhood site at Duranis, knowing that in the whole entire North Valley, there are about, there's probably 500 children that live in the entire North Valley that are under 5. That means probably about 100 of them are 4-year-olds. And it's not going to be exact. You can't divide it up exactly that way, but we're going to say there's about 100. Now, of those, half of them, according to the Early Childhood Act, they have to go to a different, they have to go to a different school, private provider, religious, etc. So we are talking about spending money for maybe 50 children out of school.
So, Board Member Mueller-Aragon, as we go through the presentation for Duranis specifically, due to the closure of La Luz, moving to MacArthur and consolidating those programs because of La Luz, MacArthur, Cochiti, we have consolidated programs to Duranis, which then involves, even though we're not adding more as a district, we're consolidating programs in the North Valley particularly that involves the need to look at Duranis as rebuilding it for an early childhood site with the current classrooms we have. In the North Valley and in Zone 3, if you see on the vacancy, we only have one vacancy open for pre-K in Zone 3, which is primarily the Northwest side and the North Valley. So Los Ranchos is the only school currently that had room for one student in that area. So as we go through the proposal, it's to look at how we can retrofit Duranis for the consolidation of the current programs that are at Duranis. You want to go over?
Okay, just tell me, just tell me a little bit, say it again. So I can get those like numbers in my head.
You can do this one.
So I think, Allison, you had the number of programs that we're moving to Duranis
Yes.
that are already going to be there.
Yes, so this next school year, we will have 4 DPC programs at Duranis, 2 New Mexico pre-Ks, and 1 Zuni immersion pre-K program at Duranis.
Okay, and that's just the DPC. That's not just the regular pre-K. So you're talking about just the DPC right now, or you're talking about both?
4 of the classes would be DPC, so they're doubling, right, what they currently have.
Okay. And so right now at Duranis, there would have been 12 vacancies. And then what other schools was it La Luz that had 12 vacancies in DPC, right? So I'm just trying to put all those numbers
Correct.
together and just try to figure that out. It just seems that we're trying to do something where that we have vacancies that we can't. I just don't know how you think we're going to draw these children.
So currently
in.
at Duranis, their pre-K program, they had 1 New Mexico pre-K program this year and it was full. As you can see in the Zone 3 here, only Los Ranchos had 1 vacancy, as Dr. Blakey had explained. And so by adding that second New Mexico, we're taking the pre-K program that was at MacArthur and we're moving it to Duranis, right? And so that Duranis was already full. And so the students that would have enrolled at MacArthur for pre-K will now be enrolling in that second classroom at Duranis. And then we have the 4 DPC classes because there was already 2 DPC classes at Duranis, and then the 2 from La Luz are moving to Duranis. So we're not adding any more classes. We're just moving, we're kind of shuffling and moving programs from one site to another to consolidate. And the Zuni program and the Zuni, yes, thank you, Dr. Blue. And the Zuni immersion program. That program is being funded by Indian Education.
So can you tell me, I'm assuming that there's like wait lists, because I know people that tried to get their kids into a certain school and they had to preschool and they had to go somewhere else. Like I know that. So can you tell me what the wait list look like?
So I can tell you that we have compiled, this is the first year that APS has been able to compile all of the wait lists from every single school. So before all of the clerks went on summer break, we asked them to send the early childhood department their wait lists. And we do have a document that has every single school's wait lists. I think there was only maybe 3 that we didn't hear from, but all the other school sites, we have their wait list in one document. So we can go and we've linked their wait list to this one document. So yes, we can go back and see which schools are still open and which schools are filling up, so that we can go into the pre-K registration queue, and we can let parents know that a school that they may have requested is full, but these other schools have space. And so that's how we're hoping to fill up those vacancies this year, is by because this is the first time all schools have been required to turn their wait list in or their registration list into one site.
So you can pass that information onto the board?
Yes, definitely.
To see that. So you anticipate that you will end up having hundreds and hundreds of students at Duranes?
So
when there aren't hundreds and hundreds in that, they're not, no matter what you say, they are not there. And our population in Albuquerque is just going down. And it has from last year, from 2020 to 21, from 21 to 22. I anticipate the same thing is going to happen this summer as well.
So to fill a New Mexico pre-K site at Duranes, we only need 15 New Mexico pre-K students, because several of our spots are allocated for inclusion, right? Several of our spots, we partner with special education, and so not every single classroom in APS can go to the full 20, is not funded for the full 20 because we do the inclusion.
Correct.
So to fund a second classroom at Duranes, we only need 15 students. So I understand there's not hundreds of students, waiting to be enrolled, but I'm pretty positive there's at least 15.
Okay. Because somewhere in here, I saw that 300, it's going to accommodate up to 300 students. So I'm just assuming if you wanted to accommodate 300 students, that you're going to build it that way, and then you're going to have it not be at anywhere near capacity, the same as what Duranes is right now.
So, Board Member Peggy Mueller, Aragon. So in terms of, and this is why we need to move to the design function. Form is determined by function. And you're right. In terms of what we design and what we build a building for is determined by the need out there, by the technical need. And so in moving forward and starting to lay down all these parameters, given that going down the next few years, we're going to have a much bigger universe in terms of available kids who will be eligible based on the new rules for early childhood, not just for us, but for early providers, for all the other providers. We have to anticipate that we need to design something and build something to be ready and not let students, your district, as you know, was part of this, where for a while we didn't build schools and we waited and waited until schools were 120, 140% above capacity before and we're just catching up in your district in spite of the downside in population. So this is the same kind of philosophy we are doing, using Duranes as a pilot, but also this being precipitated with the downsizing and maximizing efficiency in terms of how we use our existing facilities.
Sell them. Build some nice affordable housing that we know we need desperately, get some developers to go in there and do something that will help house some of our people that can't find affordable housing. So then some of the other questions I have is, how much will this, we have an election coming up, and as some of you already know, that we had some special elections in some of the districts, and their mill levy, it didn't get approved in some of these. I mean, it just didn't, and we want to make sure that ours does. So we need to be thinking about that when we're trying to spend money where we have less population and we have less children. So we have to keep that in mind. How much do you, and I know you can't give me a total figure because I know things go up and down, supply chain, the cost of labor. How much do you think it will cost to build this early childhood center?
So going back, let me start off with how this is anticipated to be funded. This is an opportunity using federal ESSER funds that if we don't tie them down by the fall, we're going to lose them. So it's an opportunity to leverage federal funds. That way we don't have to go and really charge our taxpayers for what is essentially a pilot. But at the same time, it is an opportunity that if we don't do this with the ESSER funds, we're going to lose them. And in terms of what you're talking about, the refurbishing of this particular school, we already have an approval of $3 million in ESSER to design and start construction, not only of the early childhood center, but the reverberations of what we've done with right sizing, because as kids move from Duranes K through 5, they're going to move to Cochiti and the other neighboring school next to it. So we need to add classrooms and make sure that they have equity at those two schools. And MacArthur, in absorbing their almost 100 kids that were over at La Luz, will need a little bit of work in terms of refurbishing. So we have been approved for $3 million in terms of ESSER funds for design and beginning of construction. And we are also in the process of being approved for up to $30 million to do the construction of not only Duranes, but the refurbishment of these other 3 schools.
Okay, so that was an exact answer, but so when I'm just thinking about everything that our schools need right now, and HVACs that don't work, safety concerns that we have, I mean, just so many things that our schools need right now. This is an allowable expense for ESSER funds. I'm assuming that it is an allowable expense. But is it an expense that we should take on instead of some of the other things that are really important to the community?
We, Board Member Peggy Mueller, we have maximized ESSER funds. I think it's up to 60 to 70 million for just HVAC. Technology and all these other needs. This was an opportunity given within ESSER to improve not only classrooms, equity, and early childhood. That was within ESSER. So we expanded our leveraging of existing ESSER funds while they're still available. So we're trying to do all those other things too.
Well, I mean, we all know about, the loss of learning, and that's what we should be like really focusing, honestly focusing on making sure our kids get the enrichment that they need and that get caught up as much as they can rather than doing something like this. And I will just kind of go back to, I think it was in, now I'm not going to find it. When you were talking about, I think it was the goal 1.1, I think, Dr. Segura, you were talking about, right? And if I knew the interim goal. And of course, I'm not going to find it now.
It was right at the beginning.
Okay, so you're talking about the percentage of kindergarten students identified in Yazzie Martinez who demonstrate grade level proficiency. So that was, put out here. That is talking about getting our kids where they need to be. This is not talking building. This is not talking about this interim goal. And what this goal to me says is it says, make kindergarten better, which is something that I've always been for and that we haven't done. We tried, kindergarten readiness. They're not ready. They're not ready to read. We tried that with all day kindergarten. So something happened and we're not making kindergarten be what it's supposed to be. And that's where our focus should be, making sure they have the best academic outcomes they possibly can. And I know that you did say, Ms. Gabaldon, that you're not moving toward 3-year-olds, but then I keep hearing this, birth, starting at birth, which scares me to death. I mean, that is just, all of that is concerning because we're looking at how did Head Start work out? That's everything that they were supposed to be doing. So you want to do something that it just hasn't worked. So we have to do something to make what we have just better. Make the preschool that we have, make it better. Make kindergarten better. You don't have to build a school and spend millions of dollars to try to make that learning, that teaching and learning in the classroom better. And that's just what I think. And that's what people out there are saying. And we have not got to hear from our early childhood providers. I would want them here. I mean, we don't want to close a bunch of businesses down.
So I've spoken to our several of our early childhood providers. ECECD had a session where we got to work together on the grant as a community. So I sat down and I asked our community providers, what is preventing you from adding another pre-K classroom? And they said space. They said we are having trouble finding space. I mean, there was one community provider who said to me, Allison, I'm thinking about changing my warming kitchen into a classroom so I can get more kids in here, right? So, and that's what they told me their personal challenges, because ECECD does not fund buildings. They do not fund space. And so that was they told me that was their biggest challenge, was finding the space to expand their programs.
And we can just say that all of these 365, I think that was the number that I heard, providers, right? I think that was the number that they're all okay with this and that they think their business is going to be just fine.
I think if we work in conjunction with them, instead of competing with them, I think if we work in conjunction with them and show them, look, there's so many children out there that need to be served. We are only serving a very small percentage of those. And if we can work together and get a functional system to where we can be referring to each other, I think we can serve more children. And I also agree with you, Board Member Mueller-Aragon, we need to have high quality early childhood programs. And that is definitely a focus of ours, is having high quality early childhood programs. But I also think having high quality facilities helps us have high quality early childhood programs. So I think that's something to consider too, when we're talking about this Duranis consolidation.
And I think just for clarification on the discussion on Duranis, we're talking about the proposal for Duranis is to consolidate the current programs that we have in the area to maximize what we've been doing with right sizing. So this particular proposal that we're discussing tonight is looking at how we consolidate the programs that we currently have and best utilize the space that we have. For example, with moving La Luz, how can we consolidate Duranis, which already has a lot of early childhood? Can we consolidate all of the classrooms there? And when we talk about Yazi Martinez specifically, we're talking about how can we maximize the DPC classrooms that we have in that space and the Zuni immersion program that we have, and make sure that they're not in classrooms that are makeshift early childhood spaces, but maximize by leveraging these funds that we have at the time to leverage them to create the space at Duranis as a consolidation site for early childhood for this particular proposal.
Because I'm also, I mean, speaking to that is just wondering, looking at all these schools, are those classrooms equipped for 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds? I mean, are they truly, is the infrastructure for that group of children? Anyway, I mean, I'm just thinking about some at schools I've taught at, and they don't look like, and good learning still happens. I don't think it's all about exactly what that classroom looks like. But I'm just wondering how many of those classrooms really are equipped to house 3- and 4-year-olds. And that maybe money would be well used to make sure those classrooms that we already have are up to date and built the way they should be for 3- and 4-year-olds.
In understanding your question, that's actually exactly what we're going to try and do with Duranis. Make sure that all the classrooms, and it's not just classrooms, it's equipment, it's playgrounds.
Right.
It's a whole new paradigm. So with this new constitutional amendment, there's requirements that require, which is why the early childhood providers are kind of, a lot of people are actually struggling to provide spaces. They won't give you money just for any old space. They have specific requirements of what those spaces will look like, what the playgrounds will look like, what the teachers need to get paid, what the equipment you need to have. And this is what our initiative on this is all about.
Madam Chair, just as a point of order, I know I started off the questions with when we were on the enrollment part, just questions about goals, but looking ahead, it does look like a lot of the answers to the questions that we're peppering the group with are coming up. So I'm wondering if just in terms of process, we could just go back to the presentation and then do the questions after that.
We can go on to the next page or next slide.
Board member, I did want to point out that Josefina Dominguez did have her hand up, just so you are aware.
Okay, go ahead, Josefina.
Excuse me, as another point of order, I just have a question about committee members versus not committee members, and are non-committee members allowed to ask questions?
I was under the impression that we were designated as committees, so we designate a committee, and it's only the committee members so we're a discussion group. They can send their questions to us,
Yeah,
so.
I think that's how it is.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Member Dominguez.
That's fine. I'll send you my question.
I also agree. We just need to go through the thing because I think we've missed the presentation, which really was telling us the gist of why this consolidation and this pilot and what it's going to look like, because it is also it's a new time in terms of New Mexico with regard to early childhood. And I mean, that was the point of ECECD and the work that they're doing. So, and I know that other school districts are also engaged in this at a national level. So I think I also would like to hear the rest of the presentation and we can go from there.
Okay, thank you. So the proposed site is to repurpose Duranis Elementary School and retrofit it into an early childhood center that may accommodate up to 300 students. This may include what we call a kit of parts, wraparound services, and the design of which has been funded with ESSA funds. Cochiti Elementary, as related to this, will receive a new classroom block to include 5 new classrooms, of which 3 will be general education, 1 music, 1 art. Also design construction with ESSA funds. And then Reginald Chavez will receive new ancillary educational facilities, including administration, cafeteria, kitchen, mini gym, and classrooms. Next page, please. So early childhood facility needs are similar, but not concurrent, and that's what Ms. Peggy Mueller-Aragon was alluding to earlier, not concurrent with existing kindergarten standards, which exist and form the basis of what is there at our existing elementary school sites, which is why we need to recalibrate and redesign what we're talking about for early childhood. Early childhood needs are more intensive than 1st to 12th grade, just in terms of design, in terms of space, in terms of specialty. As a result, as you just reminding the committee, the repurposing of La Luz, with existing students being absorbed mostly into MacArthur and Duranes. MacArthur for the K-5 students, Duranes for the early childhood students. And also, as a result of right sizing, La Luz and MacArthur and Duranes will have 7 classrooms for the 2023-2024 years in terms of early childhood. And so, and then again, going back, Cochiti, Reginald Chavez, La Luz and MacArthur will be consolidated at Duranes, all the early childhood. So next page. This just talks about, next page, please. There you go. So the ramifications of La Luz Elementary, in terms of what it meant in terms of 2 developmental preschool programs, the grades K through 5, and then New Mexico pre-K classrooms, and the extra programs, the Zuni program that Ms. Gabaldon alluded to. And then basically what will happen eventually with the K through 5 at Duranes will be moved to Cochiti Elementary Schools, Reginald Chavez Elementary Schools. Next page, please. And Ms. Gabaldon, so this brings us to determining what the space will actually look like, given it's a new paradigm. And Ms. Gabaldon, I think, can you talk a little bit about why the groups that are there in the design committee are there?
Definitely. So we're putting together an APS Early Childhood Center Design Committee because we want to get input from everybody, right? To make sure that what we are designing is beneficial for not just APS, but for the community at large. And so on this committee, we have the City of Albuquerque Early Childhood Representative, Bernalillo County Early Childhood Representative, UNM, CNM, 2 private community early child provider representatives, a representative from YDI, APS Curriculum Instruction, APS Special Education, APS Indian Education, and then APS Facilities Design and Construction, and then the APS Capital Master Plan. We want this to be an extensive committee that really looks at what we're doing, right? We want what we're doing to be successful, and we want what we're doing to be embraced by the community at large.
So next page, please. So to matriculate this, just like we did with La Luz and we did with the other schools early in the right sizing, we are recommending to go through an administrative school attendance area change recommendation for Duranes, Reginald Chavez, and Cochiti. So basically absorb all the Duranes K through 12, K through 5, sorry, into Reginald Chavez and Cochiti. And so basically this change should go into effect upon the completion of the improvements, not only and retrofitting, not only at Duranes, but at Reginald Chavez and Cochiti. And in the next 3 pages, we talk about what the numbers are. So you can see currently Duranes has 191 students in the attendance boundary. Reginald Chavez has 238, Cochiti has 232. And in the proposed attendance area, Reginald Chavez will have 285, Cochiti will have 376. Next page, please. And you can also see the percentages in which, in terms of projections that we project will be in terms of attendance for all 3 schools. So you can see the current attendance area for Duranes Elementary School. And then if you go to the next page, the current attendance for Reginald Chavez, and these schools are all next to each other. And then the next page is the current attendance for Cochiti Elementary. And then next page, please. So these will be the proposed attendance area changes for Reginald Chavez Elementary and Cochiti Elementary, which they'll absorb the existing Duranes Elementary School attendance area. We have worked with the communities. Mr. Bell, who is not here anymore, but we've been working with the communities to not only anticipate this, but a lot of the community already go to these 2 schools. They already go to Cochiti, they already go to Reginald Chavez, and we've made sure the busing patterns are not disrupted. And certain clusters of housing that are adjacent to each school, the changes are not going to be that dramatic because kids already go to these schools historically. And then next page, please. You can see no changes in the feeder schools, except there will be a small area over here in terms of Washington Middle School. So we've tried to make this as least disruptive as possible.
When Mr. Bell was working with the community, one of the things that they had said was they wanted to make sure that the feeder pattern stayed the same. So the students who would go to Reginald Chavez, originally we had them jumping back over to Taylor and Valley. And when she was working with the community, they asked to stay with the feeder pattern. So they would go to Reginald Chavez, Washington, and Albuquerque High as to stay in the feeder pattern.
So it's that little cross area up to the middle of the map. And basically this was community, community comments that said they want to stay at Washington, and if that could be made official. And so that has been proposed in this.
And there's an area on the prior map of Duranes and Cochiti that actually a lot of students do transfer to Cochiti because they can actually walk to Cochiti, but they have to ride the bus when they go to Duranes. So that group of students would be able to not transfer and just attend Cochiti and be able to walk.
So next page, please. So last page is just links of early childhood additional materials on the research, basically that talks about the LFC committee findings, SB 230 analysis, and also the partnering of APS and CAVQ and pre-K that's existing right now, a summary of the constitutional amendment that has changed the landscape, and commentary on New Mexico First to guarantee a right to early childhood education. And we thought these would be good information background just for the committee and also for the board to have in terms of what are the things that we are looking at as we are going forward and making these decisions and recommendations. And you will get these electronically so that you can access them. And with that, we're open to questions.
So, board member, may I?
Go ahead.
Okay, so, I mean, what I'm hearing is that it sounds, because what I also remember hearing from the community, distinctly hearing from the community, is not having our pre-K with our regular school setting, because there was this fear of having our little 4-year-olds in a setting where there was other kids going all the way to 5th grade. So it sounds like we're creating this hub, which is an opportunity for us to really get really good at this, really demonstrate it. But it sounds like it's also an opportunity for the teachers that are in that setting to also have a network. And there's this way to also, do the professional development, do all those things and get to that point of high quality. What does this mean for us to be in this kind of a setting? I really like that you're looking at a community where there's already some pre-K programs, and we're going to consolidate that, because part of the right sizing piece is pushing the K-5 out, but pulling in the K, the pre-K into a spot. And I do like that whole notion, because we're using our ESSER funds to also address all of these schools and all of this area so that we could figure out how this all comes together. What I also appreciate is the committee that you've put together, because we don't have the answers in terms of what that design is going to look like. What does it mean for the private providers as a partner with us in this? Because it could be part of it. I don't know what that's going to look like. And it's like you're asking us to take this plunge with you and to take this risk with you. I've heard that other districts have created these hubs, and this is kind of what's happening nationally. And this is APS's step into that particular arena. And I appreciate the thought that's gone into, like, we're going to start from this point. And we're going to say, I also am concerned about, like, what's our vision and how we're going to get there? Because I remember the first time we had this committee meeting, it was like, well, we're going to open a hub here and a hub there and a hub. And we were all like, what's a hub? And, what are we doing? So this gives us this opportunity. How long? So we're going to start this, and we're going to get all of our, I'm assuming as the new director, you'll come in, you're going to set some goals and some things that you want to see, and that will be reported out to us. Is that also going to be part of the designing and the strategy for, like, the next hubs as we move forward? That's what is to inform us? Because it's going to cost us money to do that, correct? I mean, it's going to cost us past ESSER funds to do that. So that's my first question. And the second question is, some of this is also being driven for us by ECECD, who's making a request to APS. We need you to be engaged with us as a partner. Am I correct on that? And what's the ask that ECECD has of us?
So the ask beyond what we are already doing with ECECD.
Mm-hmm.
So ECECD would like APS to partner with them and grow our early childhood program so that we could serve more of the population that the community providers are unable to serve because of their space restrictions.
Okay. And so, and you as a director using this hub, what would your timeline look like in terms of strategy, and what are you thinking with coming forward to the board in terms of what we're gonna, because this is initial investment, but.
Definitely.
Okay.
Isidro, do you want to talk more?
In terms of the technical timeline, as we talk, we would bring this design proposal to the board in, I think, June or July. June or July, depends. And then that will take around, because it's a different kind of committee. We have to get together and be on the timeline of the private providers and our other.
But that's for the big vision.
For just this.
Just for
particular-
this, but you,
For,
okay.
for just for Duranis.
Just for
Because
Duranis,
that
okay.
will drive the big vision.
Okay.
You know, we don't want to jump to the big vision before we do this.
And I get that. I mean, I understand that part, that we're using this as a way to sort of build out our vision going forward. I'm just trying to get an idea of like, when do we anticipate having this big vision forward? Because, and I'm going to talk out loud here, because the reality is if we didn't do this, we just we're still need to consolidate these schools. So we're just trying to figure out in the meantime, can we make the best of what we're going to do with a building that we have at Duranis so that we can consolidate, because we're going to take them out of their other schools that they're at. And we're really literally going to move families to this hub and try out a hub. Okay, I get it. Okay.
Definitely. Yeah, the pilot program is trying out this hub idea, right? And then the ultimate idea would be, you know, as I'm sure has been shared with you previously, is putting a hub in each zone, right?
Right.
Having a hub in each zone. That's the long-term idea,
that's the
right?
game plan.
And that would help address some of our zones that are already maxed out. You know, as we showed, like zone 3 and zone 1 that don't have any vacancies because they have full waiting lists. We've got kids
Okay.
waiting on lists to get into programs there.
Okay.
And Board Member Montoya Cordova, I appreciate the question, just in reiterating that this is part of the larger, rewind back to the 8 schools we identified that need to be right-sized. They still need to be right-sized. So this is a proposal for Duranis's right-sizing.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
I have, President Montoya Cordova started by sort of pointing back to some of the comment that we've received, that there is a preference for students, 4-year-olds, to be with an early childhood setting in its entirety. So I think that perspective was represented by some of the early childhood providers. I think to the contrary, I think there are a lot of parents who would like their younger children to be in the same setting as their older children. That was my situation, and that's why my kids didn't go to Alvarado, because they didn't have a pre-K spot for us. And so my question is, as we're building these hubs, are we also going to maintain pre-K in the other schools? So
Yes.
Okay.
So it's not a one size fits all. It's having, just like we were talking about earlier, options for families for K-12. This is options for families for early childhood.
awesome. My second question, I don't know what the numbers are, the APS Early Childhood Center Design Committee. So looking at the committee, I want to echo the congrats and the appreciation for establishing a committee to make and inform these decisions. I'm a little concerned around the number and proportion that are government officials. So if I count, there's 10 people who are related to APS, City of Albuquerque, Bernalillo County, UNM, CNM, et cetera, and only 3 that are essentially non-government or real people. So I'm curious, is there an opportunity to add more of that, whether it's from NMAEYC or the Child Care Association or something else? It feels a little bit skewed towards government, frankly.
Definitely. I think we definitely could add more representatives from the community-based programs, and I can talk to providers who might want to be on the committee and have their voice.
So I see providers, that was my second question, was how are you going to select the providers? But my first question was, can we expand it? So there's like NMAYC would represent sort of collectively the early childhood community. I don't know that they're the right group, but maybe someone from the Child Care Association. I just think that beyond actual providers who have a vested interest, that there ought to be a more community voice represented. So maybe parent organizations or something else. So that
we can make those additions.
And then the second was, how will you choose the 2 private/community early childhood provider representatives?
So those representatives have already been chosen. One of those representatives was nominated by Board Member Peterson. She nominated one of the representatives. The representative is from Cuidando los Niños. And then the other representative from the private community early childhood is another provider from Explora, is also opening up a childcare center. And so the Explora has expressed an interest in being part of our committee as well.
Okay. Those are my questions for now. Thank you.
And I don't know if Member Peterson, I think she might be gone.
She is.
There she
I'm
is.
still
Okay, Member Peterson, go ahead.
I'm still here. Really no particular questions. I mean, I think we're moving forward. I, again, just want to reiterate first off, the community has spoken. They passed a constitutional amendment to support preschools. And I think the community has spoken loud and clear that we need more options for good quality preschool. So I am excited by the possibilities of moving forward. I think many districts around the country are working on figuring out the best design, basing it on the best science and knowledge of early childhood, young child development that we have. And it seems like we've got a good representation to move forward with that. So again, just thank you for the work that's getting done.
Okay. So then a question that I have is, I know this is a pilot. How long? Is it a 2-year pilot? 5-year pilot?
Board Member Mueller-Aragon, I don't know that this is a pilot with a time frame per se. I think this is a pilot to get it right before we even consider scaling out to other zones potentially. And so I think when maybe it's, it's the wrong word to use pilot, but it's not something that we're looking to establish and then it goes away.
It's more of a demonstration site.
Prototype.
Prototype. There you go. I like that.
That might be a different word to use. So what would, how would you know it was successful? Is it going to be driven by numbers? Like you have this many kids and that makes it successful? What would success look like?
I think this is going to provide us with a really interesting and exciting opportunity to try to hub all of the educational, components, as well as the play and all of that, as well as the wraparound services, so that it's all hubbed in one place and that they're working collaboratively as a complete wraparound for early childhood pre-K. And that could look differently than if some of our other sites that just have pre-K classrooms may not have some of those wraparound services that we're looking to embed within the building so that it's right there to help support that program to grow. We're funded in public ed off of numbers. So yes, enrollment is important, but I think this is an opportunity for us to get it right and then look at our other programs, look at best practices, look at what, we could do to create a model hub for pre-K. And what does that then look like going into kindergarten, and how are we launching our kids into kindergarten by getting it right and looking at those wraparounds within the hub.
Okay, so then I'm sure I'm not understanding you correctly. So you think one of the important parts of this hub would make sure that all those wraparound services are there. So then are we saying that right now in the preschools in these schools, they don't have the wraparound services that they need?
No, not necessarily, just not possibly to the magnitude that we, could have in this model. And I think, we'll look at success also by kindergarten readiness and the outcome of students, we can look comparatively at the different pre-K sites to say, did this work? Is this working? I mean, my hope is that all of our pre-K classes are getting our kids kindergarten ready, not just a hub. And that there are wraparound services in our schools, but our schools are serving, maybe those wraparound services are serving all of the kids versus a focused level of student, and they're not maybe spread so thin, part-time at this school site and part-time at another school site. So I think there's different things that we can look at, and I'm just hopeful. I think that we've made it very clear that our vision is to get all of our pre-K kids kindergarten ready so that they can be successful as they move forward in all the other grade levels.
Okay. And I mean, I would want to know what kindergarten ready means, because kindergarten now is what first grade used to be. And so what does that, what does
So
that
I
mean?
think looking at our early childhood observation tool as one metric, and then also our kindergarten observation tool as another metric, and then them going into the interim assessments that the state requires us to do, and looking at that data and saying, where are our gaps? What are we seeing? Is it, a student, a specific learning gap? Is it something that we're just missing that we need to relook at? So I think there's multiple things, but I think those are in my brain are thinking about the early childhood observation tool, the kindergarten observation tool. And then there's
And then there's the early learning guidelines, which, all of our which is basically the standards for pre-K, for all pre-K programs.
And for special ed, there's the early childhood outcome assessment as well. So when you look at all of these things and triangulate them, that gives you a pretty good sense of student progress.
Okay. And so how long do you think it would take to see this? Because it didn't work for all-day kindergarten. And yet we still didn't do the right thing and make kindergarten better. And so now we're going to try something else to try to get them ready for kindergarten. So then if that doesn't work when they're 4, then we're going to say we're going to have a 3-year-old program to get them ready for preschool, because that's what we keep on doing. We keep on not making things better. We keep doing the same thing and just adding another grade and adding more time and not figuring out what are we not doing right.
Yes, I agree. We have got to get it better across the board in every grade level. And that is what I believe I'm committed to. And I know that everyone at this table in our district is committed to making it better, looking at what is working. What are the strategies that, some of these other states who are seeing some of those turnarounds, what are they doing? And what is our research showing does work? And if we're not implementing some of those things, why? And how do we get things to be, like I said, across the board, a kindergarten classroom shouldn't really look much differently than one from another side of town. We need to have some continuity of instruction, of expectations, of supports for our kids, but we do. I mean, I think I'm looking, just staring at this banner, student outcomes don't change until adult behavior changes. And we have been through a pandemic, and I'm saying we can't use that as an excuse. We have got to get going. And like Dr. Blakey stated, our kids are hungry. They're ready. They're excited. They want to learn. And it's up to us as adults to get it right. And so I'm looking at, research. How do we create strong foundations of literacy and numeracy with our kids, starting in those pre-K classes? But it can't just be that. There has to be the fun and the play and the interactions and the social emotional development coupled with that. And so across the board, I think we have a lot of very committed individuals who are ready to do this work and put things in place for all of our kids. I truly believe that. Maybe I'm too much of an optimist.
No, it's good to be if we just do things differently and do it right. That's what we have to do. the fact is this isn't mandated. So they have to go to kindergarten. They don't have to go to preschool. And I'm not for mandating anything like that because I think that's up to parents to decide that. But we may have some of the children who really could use it, could really use preschool that aren't going to come. And how are we going to honestly know that those children that really need it are the ones that are there?
I think that is something we definitely need to look into. But when I look back, I remember the day that our kids moved on to kindergarten because it was like we didn't have to make another house payment. We saved so much money. And I feel like even culturally as a family, and like I'm speaking from my experience, I had my mom, Anana, who wanted to take the kids, teach them, read to them, do all this stuff. Some families, their choice is to leave the kids with Nana, and that is what they're able to do. And that's what they
Best
want
place
to
to
do.
be.
What's that?
Best place to be.
Yeah. So, I think there's different reasons why. I think we're, I look at Dr. Blea and Ms. Gabaldon, and they are, excited and interested to see where are the kids going and how do we get families to invest in us, not just APS, but in early childhood in general. Because it does provide a strong foundation for our kids, but we do have to get it right. And I think
that's just obviously, that is my concern.
Yes,
That is totally my concern because I saw what happened. I just saw what happened with kindergarten.
Yeah, more doesn't mean better.
more-
I agree.
Adding more hours, and these kids will be in school the same amount of time as a kindergartner, which I think is cruel, in my opinion. It's awful, horrible thing to do to a 4-year-old. And just because they have more time doesn't mean that more time is going to equate to them being ready for kindergarten.
Yeah, and obviously, we don't have the choice in how much time as a district, but I think you do have our commitment to, to get it right and to look, and if something's not working, to not be afraid to pivot and to change and give more attention where where it's needed.
And so is transportation going to be provided? Because we always know that's an impediment.
At this time, transportation is not provided for preschool students.
Okay.
The exception is
Except for-
with an IEP.
Is with IEP.
It's not funded. So for transportation, remember, we don't provide any operational funds to run our transportation department. It's all on state reimbursement, and the state doesn't reimburse for preschool students.
See,
So we would have to fund it out of our operational budget.
so that's a possibility then.
It would be a possibility if we were able to provide the resources internally to outfit the buses to transport the students, because they have to be in seats, and we would have to hire drivers.
And then for this early childhood center, is it basically just going to be for that neighborhood? So if you work downtown and you might want your child to go there, transportation would obviously be difficult because could be coming from all over, correct?
Correct, but the early childhood centers are not bound by neighborhood addresses. So they could, if anybody is, which is also kind of a nice location for Duranis because it is like right off of the freeway. So if somebody was working downtown and they found that was a convenience, we have that right now, even with the neighborhood sites. You don't have to go to kindergarten when you go to preschool somewhere. And a lot of families choose pre-K specifically for being closer to a work site than a house. And we see that a lot in our pre-K classrooms.
Right. I mean, I think that's what a lot of people do is like wherever, if it's closer to work or it's on the way to work, that's where they drop off. So then basically, I think will be my last question. I have some other questions that got sent in a few weeks ago. So if you all can answer those, and then the ones that I did ask tonight, and then I didn't see this, but it said you're consolidating early childhood classrooms from Cochiti, Reginald, Chavez, La Luz, and MacArthur will be consolidated at Duranis. Does Cochiti, Reginald, Chavez, and MacArthur have early childhood classrooms right now?
So
'Cause they weren't on that list, or I missed them.
Cochiti has an early childhood program, a New Mexico pre-K program.
But it's the different one than what is listed on here.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what I just made that like assumption, because I was like, well, they're not on this list, so it has to be from.
So as
The
I
other
understand, the only ones that were listed were the ones that had vacancies.
Correct. Not all of
Because we
the,
have 56 sites.
correct. The sites are all on the map. The sites with vacancies are on the list.
Right, okay.
Okay. Okay. I think that's it then.
Madam
Unless
Chair,
there's something else?
before we close, I just wanted to express appreciation to Dr. Segura for your optimism. Because I agree, I think this is a tremendously exciting opportunity for our community, not just our school district, but our entire community. And in addition to this optimism, we have decades of prior practice to model off of. The Pre-K for All movement started in the early 2000s. I think we know from all of that data what happens when we expand opportunities to families. If you look at Oklahoma, Georgia, New Jersey, some of the early states that established Pre-K for All, they had take-up rates up to the 70-80% rates. So we can use some of that data to make some assumptions in our case. We can look at some of the states that led with quality, like Alabama and Tennessee versus states that led with quantity. I won't name them, but I think that there's some things that we can do to see and be really intentional and learn from past mistakes. And so I think we have the right skill and will and optimism. I'm really excited about that. And I think just from the perspective of the North Valley, I also want to express appreciation to the district for all of the outreach that you've done to that community, to the neighborhood associations, to the schools, and to parents individually. I've heard specifically from parents that they've been contacted individually, proactively. So just really appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Okay, so the next right sizing discussion group will meet at 5 o'clock in the DeLeo Martin Room on a yet to be determined date. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.